Hi, everyone. My name is Elena Martinez, and I'm one of the co-artistic directors of the Bronx Music Heritage Center. Welcome tonight to our next installment of Percussion Discussion, where we discuss and perform all things to do with drums and percussion. And so tonight, we're really excited to sort of have like a post-Bomba special percussion discussion with a very special guest. As many of you know, there was the 20th anniversary of Bomba this past weekend, which showcases all things traditional music of the Puerto Rican genres of bomba and plena. And tonight we have with us a guest all the way from the West Coast, from the Bay Area, Denise Solis, the great percussionist. So before we start, I just want to say a fast thing. I'm going to just mention our funders. The Bronx Music Heritage Center programming is supported in part by the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of Governor Andrew Cuomo and the New York State Legislature, public funds from the New York State Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council, the Lily Auchincloss Foundation, and the Laurie and Tim Tisch Illumination Fund. So now I'm going to let the other artistic director, Bobby SANABRIA, take it away.
Hi, everybody. You are at the place to be, the BMHC, the Bronx Music Heritage Center, and you're in tune with our percussion discussion, where we discuss all things percussive, especially related to the traditions that are all represented by different drumming styles that are found here in the Bronx. With our special guest tonight, remember that you'll be able to ask questions. So in the chat function on your Facebook or Zoom or however you're tuned in, please, you can start asking questions and our guest will answer them. And tonight we have a special guest. You know, people are always asking me, what is the role of women in music, in all forms of music, etc.? Well, the role of women is that they're coming out in full force in all forms of music, be it jazz, be it pop music, be it rock, funk, whatever, and especially in all forms of Latin music. And when we're talking about Puerto Rico, we're talking about especially our indigenous forms like the plena, which Maestro Tito Matos talked about in our previous percussion discussion. But we're here to discuss the bomba tradition, which is represented by this drum of African descent that is found on the island of Puerto Rico, a barril de bomba, a bomba barrel, which comes in various sizes and is used in the music. We're going to talk about that with our great guest, who happens to be a labor organizer, an activist, and also a fantastic musician in this tradition that is found here in New York City. Obviously, it's found in Puerto Rico, but it is spread to other parts of the United States, particularly the San Francisco, Oakland Bay Area. And we are here with her tonight. How about a big round of applause for our guest tonight, Denise Solis. Denise, welcome to Percussion Discussion.
Thank you. Buenas noches. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Bobby, and thank you, folks at BronxNet, Elena, Georgie, for inviting me.
Fantastic. Now, this tradition of bomba, for those of you who really don't know anything about it, it has Bantu Congolese roots from Western Central Africa. We use these barrel drums. There's a big component of a solo dancer dancing with a lead drum, which is known as the Primo or Subidor, and accompanying drums are like the Buleador and Seguidor, etc. We use 2 sticks striking any type of wood surface called the kwa, and a big maraca, to accompany. But the interaction between the drummers and dancer is incredible. And this is a uniquely Afro-Puerto Rican form of music. But before we get into how you got into this, tell us, where were you born, where you were raised, and what year, your birthday as well, so we can get some insight into your culture, into your roots.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So first want to acknowledge I'm here in Oakland today. I'm standing on occupied Ohlone lands. I like to always honor the ancestors and the indigenous folks on whose land we are. So I was born in Texas. I moved to the Bay Area in 2002. So I've been here now 18 years. And my parents are from Mexico. And I was raised in Texas. And, I'm 44. I just turned 44 this year. So I'm a 76 baby. And, want to start this chat plática, charla, interview, honoring my ancestors and my elders in the bomba tradition. So I just wanted to put that out there because I think it's important to do that. And as we tell our story, I'll be honoring my maestros and maestras as well. Thank you, Bobby.
Fantastic. Now, when you were growing up in Texas, describe the music you were listening to when you were young.
Well, I got to listen to all kinds. I have a tia that was really into cumbia and salsa. And then I listened to a lot of regional Mexican music. That's my ancestors. My biological father was a very well-known musician, him and my uncle in Mexico, and they traveled the United States. So I think music was kind of in my blood from the beginning. My mom loves to sing. So my household was that household where when there was time to clean, mapear, barrer, there was always music full blast. My grandmother, my aunts, everybody was really into dancing and music. I was kind of the shyest of the family, actually, but I think music's always been part of my life.
Now, what city in Texas did you grow up in?
I grew up in Edinburgh, Texas, is in South Texas. So I am a border baby. Immigrant parents, very proud of that. Hardworking immigrant family with a very strong matriarchal presence. You know, my grandmother in our family was, you know, the rock of the family. My mom, my aunts. So I grew up in a very women-centered home with my dad who raised me, my pops. Being a very very feminist man, you know, somebody who really understood like la mujeres mandan aquí. Sorry, daddy.
Interesting. Now you mentioned an uncle that was very well known. What's his name? So maybe people will recognize him.
Sure. My biological father and uncle were part of a duo called El Palomo y El Gorrión. They did Mexican regional music. My father was an accordion player, composer, self-taught composer, musician, singer. And my uncle still lives and still sings, and his kids and my biological father's other children all do music, but in Mexico, regional music, banda, that type of music. And my uncle is a drummer, a trap drummer.
Fantastic. Now, so you're listening to this type of music growing up, and I'm sure you're listening to like we all did, popular music on the radio, rock, funk, whatever, R&B, etc. Texas is a big blues country as well, so I'm sure you grew up listening to the blues.
Absolutely.
And you said you were listening to salsa and cumbia. Who were some of the salsa artists that you remember listening to, and cumbia artists that you remember listening to?
Man, cumbia artists, I couldn't tell you. I just remembered it being in the radio. But salsa, of course, like the Hector Lavoe, Frankie Ruiz. I mean, that's the stuff that, you know, was playing popular salsa music. Cumbias from Mexico in particular. So I don't remember groups because I just remember the radio blasting. And then, of course, you know, my family was really into mariachi music, norteño music, Tejano music, that type of music.
In the culture of Texas, in the Mexican-American culture in Texas, are there certain very important days where music is played in kind of in a concert setting or festival setting outdoors that every Mexican-American in Texas, we're going to this festival today because we're honoring this, that, the other. Can you describe the vibe? The reason I'm asking that is because for us in the Puerto Rican community, especially in Bomba and Plena, during this time of the year is very important because the holidays are coming up. So is the same type of vibe in certain days in Tejas? Are they celebrated as well?
Yeah, I would say yes. I mean, Texas is a huge state. I grew up in a family that was very traditional Mexican where we didn't, you know, it was like an everyday thing. And of course, like any kind of occasion, someone's birthday, the radio was blasting, quinceañeras were a big thing. Quinces, you know, like those were, you know, that you had live bands and then a DJ while the band took a break. You know, it's a big tradition. Like if the kid's 1 year old, he doesn't know what's happening. She doesn't know what's happening, but there's like music blasting and it's like a party for the grown-ups. So it was just basically a way of life. Like every time, just like I think all Latino people, we want to get down no matter what. There's any excuse to listen to music and dance.
Exactly. Now at that time, did you have any aspirations to be a musician at that time?
I always wanted to play the accordion. to this day, I haven't learned. And I kind of feel like if I, si me lo propongo, I will be good at it just because it's in my blood, something my father did very well, my biological father. And I always wanted to play the drums. I ended up playing the trombone through school band and all that. So I played the trombone for many years. That was my first musical instrument, which, I picked up and learned pretty quickly. I have a really good ear for picking up notes, rhythms, things like that. And I did the trombone throughout my whole, from junior high on until, I kind of gave it up as an early adult.
Right.
When I got really obsessed with bomba, that was it.
Wow. Now, when you were playing trombone, were you involved in concert band, marching band? Because I know there's a big, heavy marching band tradition in Texas.
Yes, concert band, marching band, jazz band. Yes.
Fantastic. Now, at the time, had you been exposed to bomba at all?
No. Bomba came into my life in 2000.
Wow. And how did that happen? What was the Rubicon?
Absolutely. I was a cultural arts worker when I graduated from college. I was supposed to be a teacher, and I stumbled upon an organization that saved my life, or changed my life maybe, called the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center. It's still an amazing, vibrant center in San Antonio, Texas. That's where I went to college. And we were part of NALAC, which is still an amazing organization, National Association of Latino Arts and Culture, based in San Antonio. And they did this event once a year, brought all these cultural organizations together, like Pregones, a bunch of organizations. And I remember in 2000, I was working as an arts administrator at the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center. And we went to this festival. And that night it was like a conference. That night I had planned to go see Afro Mexican music, son jarocho, which I'm also a very big fan of. And so that night on the ticket, it was Mono Blanco, a amazing son jarocho traditional music group, and Los Planeros de la 21. So I was like, okay, I don't know about Los Planeros, but I'm gonna go see Mono Blanco. So Mono Blanco opened, and I happened to stick around. I don't remember who went first, but point is, I saw Los Planeros de la 21, and that changed my life. I don't recall, but I think now later I recognize who was on stage. It was like Los Planeros. I think Nelly Tanco was singing a song, because I remember her head wrap and I remember the song. And when I saw and felt the drums and saw the dancer, I think Angel Luis was there. I think it was Roberto. Just by now remembering their faces, when I saw that interaction, it really changed my life. Like something spoke to me, and I became obsessed. There was, as far as I know, there was no bomba in Texas at that time. There may have been, but not in San Antonio, because I looked it up. And I had a teacher. I had already started learning percussion because I had the resources, being that I was in this cultural center where a gentleman by the name of Neftali Medina, Boricua from Indiana, I believe, who lived in San Antonio at the time, maybe still does. Shout outs to my very first drum teacher, Neftali Medina. And he did an Afro-Caribbean class at Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center. And I took that class, but that class didn't really teach bomba. He taught West African drumming and Afro-Cuban, rumba, bata. And so I was taking that class, and I asked him, I said, I really want to learn bomba. And he was like, well, I know one rhythm called Sica, and he taught me that rhythm. And I was like, but I really need to learn. So from that moment, I became obsessed with finding where can I find bomba to learn.
For the people that are just watching and are not familiar with this group that Denise is mentioning, Los Planeros de la 21, they are led by Juango Gutierrez, who is a winner of the National Endowment of the Arts Humanities Award. National Endowment of the Arts Heritage Award. And he's been interviewed here on Percussion Discussion. So if you go to the Bronx Music Heritage Center Facebook page, you can scroll down. And last month we interviewed him here, an extensive interview about his background, et cetera, et cetera. It's fascinating, so you should check it out. And of course, check out the music of Los Planeros, who are the leading group in New York City, advancing this culture, preserving this culture, and bringing it forward into the 21st century. So you see Los Planeros.
Yes.
And obviously they did plena with the frame drums that are used in plena, but you saw this drum, and this must
That drum,
this blew your mind then,
that blew my mind.
and curved your
And
spine. So,
yes, it did.
so did you get to talk to them at all? Did you get to talk to Juan or any of the participants in the band of the band?
I didn't. I was just so moved. I really can't, you know, to this day, I think about it and I feel like I get really emotional because something spoke in deep in my soul. It really called me like nothing before. And I'm a lover of all drum traditions, but I can say that, you know, I dedicated myself to only learning bomba from that moment on. Sometimes I feel like, oh, I'd love to play rumba, but I just feel this need to continue to my journey in bomba. Like for me, that's really everything. But yeah, so I you know, I started, at that time, there wasn't a lot on the internet, to tell you the truth. So I kind of hit a couple of dead ends when I lived in San Antonio in 2000. I found 2 drums on Craigslist. So I ordered 2 drums about a year later and had a couple of
These
drums.
types of drums, barriles. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, barriles made by a company that doesn't exist anymore. It's called Caribbean Rhythms, and they're out of the Dominican Republic. So there were these 2 barrilitos with a cow skin. So they were kind of like interesting drums. I've only seen a couple of them around, but I bought my first pair of drums in 2001. And I say that because I have like tons of drums. I'm known for one of the bomberas that has just a huge collection of barriles. But something, you know, transformative happened for me in my life, personal life. I met someone and she happened to be going to Stanford for a graduate program and asked me if, you know, if I wanted to move with her to California. And of course I did. I was in love at the time, but a bonus was La Peña Cultural Arts Center was not too far away. So for me, I think it was like serendipitous because when I was still in San Antonio, I called La Peña Cultural Arts Center thinking it was the La Peña in Austin, Texas, which is about an hour away. So I said, I'll drive an hour to learn bomba. So I called La Peña. I said, you guys have bomba classes? I want to sign up. Huge shout out to La Peña. The Bomba en Plena class there, held down by Hector Lugo and Shefali Shah, because I called La Peña. I said, I'm gonna go. So what's the address? And they said, okay, we're here in Berkeley. I was like, what? Berkeley? Where the hell is Berkeley? Then I was like, shit, it's the wrong La Peña. It's like in California. So I had to wait a few months till I moved in 2002 to start learning bomba.
Now, so you had these drums, you got them, and I'm imagining from what you're describing that they weren't really true barriles de bomba in the Puerto Rican style. They're probably Dominican-based drums that for some of their traditions, like gaga and palo, etc. But do you still have the drums?
I still have them, and they are traditional bomba drums. They're just, you know, it's kind of like they were made by this company, and they're a little shorter than the traditional ones. You know, Georgie and Camilo actually played them. There's a really interesting story about those drums, because si me permites, Bobby, so I get to California in 2002, and a couple months later, La Peña Cultural Arts Center is having a Boricua Fest. And so I have the fortune of being there and finding out, and because I had a friend that I had met through a literary festival in San Antonio, Mariposa Fernandez, who's an amazing poet there from the Bronx. And so she's like, oh, I'm gonna actually be in California at this Boricua Fest. So we meet up, and part of that fest is Yerba Buena from New York. Tato and company went to do an intercambio to Berkeley, to La Peña. And so there was a workshop given by Chichito Cepeda, que en paz descanse. My very first workshop in bomba was with Chichito Cepeda and Ito Carrillo there at La Peña Cultural Center. And so here comes this, you know, short, chubby Chicana with 2 barriles to La Peña Cultural Center. I've never done bomba in my life, except for dipping my toe in the Sica rhythm. And I go to this workshop, and I was blown away. I said, I don't think I'm ever gonna get this. This is like really hard. I was just really intimidated. But the one thing is, no one had barriles because La Peña was a very new bomba community. They were playing bomba and congas, and so at the time, I recall, I think it was Hector Choco, a couple of the bomberos here in the Bay Area, said, "Hey, can we borrow your barriles for this performance we have with Yerba Buena, and you'll get in free to both performances." There was one happening in Berkeley after the workshop, and another one the next day at Macla in San Jose. And I was like, "Hell yeah, I get to see bomba, of course." Yeah. So I lent my barriles for that performance, and I know they weren't like the best barriles, but como dicen, ¿verdad? Los puertorriqueños bregaron, So yeah. that was my very first kind of bomba immersion in the Bay Area.
Wow, fantastic! So when you got the drums, you're in Texas, and you said you knew a little bit about Sica, which is a basic rhythm that has been adapted to dance orchestras, particularly by Rafael Cortijo in the 1950s in Puerto Rico. So were you trying to were you looking for recordings on the internet or asking around, hey, who can I listen to, et cetera, et cetera? Did you get any recordings at all? Did you know about Rafael Cortijo at all?
Yes, my first kind of listening adventure into bomba was Rafael Cortijo. It was El Roble Mayor, by la familia Cepeda, don Rafael Cepeda Tiles, and Los Hermanos Ayala, Bombazo and Loisa, or Bombazo. Those were the first kind of like CDs, and I would listen to them on repeat, like over and over again. So, a few months later, I get to the Bay and I start taking classes at La Peña. I had to drive a pretty good ways because I used to live in, for Bay Area people, I used to live in Palo Alto over there by Stanford and drive to La Peña and Berkeley. I want to give a shout out to the lovely folks who started the bomba movement in La Peña, and I mean in the Bay Area. And I'll probably miss some people, but definitely, there was classes in San Francisco and in Berkeley and La Peña, led by originally by Maria Elena Garcia, who's now back in Puerto Rico, by Hector Lugo, Romanito Carrillo, Shefali Shah, and then a whole crew of folks that have been in the bomba tradition since then as students as well. Like, we're all students, right? Ali Chocoluna, and then a whole, cast of Giovanni, Seda. So we were a small crew. I mean, I came in after they had already kind of started, but I got to really, learn. They brought the Familia Cepeda a few times to really kind of ground us in learning. Chichito Cepeda was a huge influence, que en paz descanse, because he was one of my teacher, Hector's teachers, also compartió mucho, obviamente, con, my subidor teacher, Romanito Carrillo. And so there's a huge influence there of La Familia Cepeda and La Bomba Cangrejera in the Bay Area. So, and one more shout out to my folks in LA and San Diego, because hay mucha bomba in California. So we have Taller Querubina, Peace Inside Out, Taller Bámbula, Hector Luis Rivera, Maristel. We have San Diego. There was first Arreito Borincano that Edwin Monclova started in San Diego, and then Jade Power Sotomayor and Jose Fute took that on when Edwin moved to the Bay Area and did Bomba Liberté. So I want to give a lot of love to all my Cali Bomba peeps.
Man, that's fantastic. And what's great about what you're teaching us is that this tradition is really growing and has grown on the West Coast with it's not just in an isolated area. So this is fantastic, and it bids well, because what's going to happen is that the students eventually become leaders in the community, and they form groups, and then they start passing on the tradition to the next generation, and they form groups, et cetera, et cetera. So this is fantastic. Tell us a little bit. So do you remember way back then, and what's the year again, 2002? You're there in Stanford, and then you go to La Peña to study. Do you remember what you learned in the first class when you got there? You said you were a little intimidated, etc. But what do you remember? What you first learned?
It was Sica. It was Sica, and there were already like these really good percussionists there that, you know, it was a jam. I mean, I recall that the folks from Yerba Buena were there, you know, Sandra Garcia Rivera, Camilo was a kid. Camilo, you know, has been doing this since he's a youngster, and Georgie, Tato, they were all there. And you know, Chichito Cepeda. Now I understand, like, that was a big deal, but at the time I didn't. Yeah, I was like, Chichito Cepeda, okay, great. You know, I think now I'm blessed that I got to have that interaction and workshop with one of the masters of bomba, right? Who was taken from us too soon. John Santos, I want to give a huge shout out to John Santos. I was a fan of John Santos before I moved to the Bay Area, because you know, I knew of his work when I was at the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center, and he was a NALAC supported artist. And so, you know, I remember it being Sica, and I remember there being other musicians there and bomberos, and you know, just that everyone kind of knew what they were doing. I was like, oh my God, I just felt really like intimidated. And so my first couple of, I would say my first year, I did a lot of observing. I did a lot of like going to bomba events in the Bay Area that were held at La Peña or at Dance Mission, bombazos, and just like seeing and listening to a lot of bomba, like as much as I could get my hands on. Now I think we're so lucky with the YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. I mean, there's so much knowledge at our fingertips right now, that at that time it wasn't, you know, it wasn't as much.
Just to give some context, Camilo, the person Camilo that Denise is talking about is Camilo Molina, who's a young master of all these traditions, and many of you know him from his work as the timbale player for Maestro Eddie Palmieri, who we interviewed here on Percussion Discussion a few weeks ago. People have been calling me, emailing me, stopping me in the street. When is part 2 of the Eddie Palmieri interview going to happen? That's going to happen sometime in November, around Charlie Palmieri, his older brother's birthday. So keep in tune with us. And she mentioned also Jorge Vasquez. We know him as Georgie. Actually, Georgie is in master control, manning the, making sure that all of this is happening technically. So, and he's one of our great young masters as well of the tradition. Now, I'm curious, when you went there for your first class, right? Were there many women there in the class, or were you the only person there that was female there?
There were women there. There was women, you know, playing the drum. I recall Suki. She's a percussion elder here in the Bay Area who's played with a lot of groups. She was there. Sue K, we call her Suki. And then the women from the bomba community that were there. It was a I couldn't recall because it's so long ago, but there were just some moments that cemented in my head. And I remember Suki being there, and you know, Javier Navarrete, who's an amazing percussionist here in the Bay Area as well, and the bomba community. Yeah. So
Javier, I know well. His brother Raul was my student in New York City.
Yes, fellow trombone player. Exacto.
Yes. Oh, yeah. You mentioned the trombone. Do you still play a little bit?
No, I just like let everything go. I'm like bomba laser focused.
You're like Mark Levine, who was also from that area. Mark Levine, the great pianist in jazz, Latin jazz, and Brazilian music. He was a trombone player, and I asked him, and he did an album for Concord Records on trombone. He was one of the early signees to Concord Records, that great. Now it's the largest independent record label in the world in terms of jazz, and also their catalog with the Stax. They bought the Stax catalog, etc. But I said to him, "Hey, Mark, how come you gave up the trombone?" And I go, because one day I did a gig on piano, and all of a sudden my phone started ringing off the hook, and that's that out. He goes, "If you got that album, it's a collector's item, because after that was the last time I ever played trombone." So anyway, a little aside there, somebody who's from the Bay Area that has worked with John Santos and all these great people that you've mentioned. All right, so you're studying bomba now intensely, right? You're studying it. You're going to different events. I'm curious. Describe the Puerto Rican community in the Bay Area, because from what you're telling me, it seems like a lot of people from different cultures have been turned on to bomba, but obviously the music, the drumming tradition, the dancing, etc., the music is of Puerto Rican origin, Afro-Puerto Rican origin. Is there a big Puerto Rican presence in the Bay Area?
Yeah, well, okay, yes, there is. And also, I would say so different from, and I'm no expert, right? But just from my own observations as a Puerto Rican ally and lover of the culture and someone who believes deeply in the liberation of Puerto Rico from Colonia. There has been a community that has held down Puerto Rican activism in solidarity with Puerto Rico in the Bay Area for many years. It's very women-led, so I want to shout out to the women who have been holding down the way that looks like being organized in the Bay Area. Aurora Levins Morales, who's now in Puerto Rico, right, doing agricultural and food sovereignty work. There's the women from La Tertulia Boricua and Bay Area Alliance for Sustainable Puerto Rico. So, I'm going to miss some, but Silvia, Aixa, Susana, Barbara, Edie, there's a crew of people that have held stuff down. And then there's Bay Area Boricuas, which was young folks from the University of Berkeley, Frankie Ramos, shout out to Frankie, Khalil, Jacobs Fantausi, who's now in New York. All right, they together with Shafali and did a lot of work, when they were university students through Bay Area Boricuas. And I think when you go to like the Dia de San Juan festivals, there's tons of Puerto Ricans, and you see the flags everywhere, and those are more like salsa festivals. I think in the bomba tradition, though, it's been a smaller crew. I'm happy to say that I was able to start my own group with other Puerto Rican women in 2006 called Las Bomberas de la Bahía, that had a run from 2006 to 2015. And then when Julia Cepeda, my wife, moved from Puerto Rico to the Bay Area, we were able to add on to that amazing community through Taller Bombalele, which we co-founded in 2014, and have seen the community grow. Keep in mind too, people have had to leave Puerto Rico, not because they wanted to, but because of the situation economically that has happened. And so we have had there's a lot of folks that come either to go to school or just for other reasons. The exodus to Puerto Rico to major urban areas has also brought more folks into the community here in the Bay Area.
So the Puerto Rican community that was already established, and would you say that community goes back to the 1940s, 30s, 50s?
Ooh, good question. There's a huge Hawaiian Rican community history here in the Bay Area, and in San Francisco. Shout out to the San Francisco Puerto Rican Club. Right now, they're the oldest Puerto Rican club, or one of the oldest. I think it's the oldest in the States, established in San Francisco. Margarita Gallagher, shout outs to you and all the folks at the Puerto Rican Center, the Puerto Rican Club. And so there's a huge history of Puerto Ricans in the Bay Area. I think that the bomba history is a little younger. Don't quote me on this, but I think it's from like the late 1990s, early 2000s. From what I understand, the influences of that have been a mentorship and a teaching from La Familia Cepeda, Modesto Cepeda, Brenda, Gladys, their school, and then now more recently, Jesus Cepeda, Tata Cepeda, who have come to give workshops to the Bay Area with the rest of the family. So there's that, mentorship or lineaje from La Bomba Cangrejera.
Fantastic. So there's a Puerto Rican community that has a long history in the Bay Area, and now it's even growing even more. Unfortunately, due to the hurricane, the earthquake, etc., and of course all the other problems that Puerto Rico historically has had, being a colony. So now you mentioned this group that was founded, I believe, was founded in 2008. You mentioned. So between 2002 and 2008, you had this great period of growth as both as a drummer in the tradition. When did you start working professionally as a musician in the scene? after you started really deep diving in 2002, you remember
Sure.
the exact date or the year, and who was it
Well,
that you first worked with? Yeah.
sure. Thank you. Well, I don't know, like professionally, that word freaks me out. But so I really want to give a lot of love and appreciation to the La Peña Cultural Center, and in particular Hector and Shafali and Ito, and the work that they've done for many years here in the Bay Area for Bomba and Plena. So I became a student and in Hector and Shafali's class on Sundays, and I think it was in 2004 maybe where we did our first carnaval. And forgive me, my people here in the Bay, if I got the date wrong. It was either 2003 or 2004. We did a carnaval, and we had bomba. And I sang for the first time. I came in by way of singing first and being a buleadora because we were learning all aspects. The only thing that I will say I'm not good at, I'll do every once in a while, is dance, but I really suck at it. So, but thanks to my teachers, I've learned all aspects. But I sang Yuba la Marile for the first time on that float and played a little bit of buleo. So I would say that was my first probably quote unquote professional performance, only because it was like for a public other than our class. And then I started participating, was asked to be an apprentice and a group member in Kacique y Kongo, which was the Bay Area bomba group led by Hector and Shafali at the time. Now it's morphed into Aguacero, but it was Kacique y Kongo, and before that it was Grupo Paulé. But I came in while it was Kacique y Kongo and I was played gua, bulyar, coros, lead sang. And then an amazing man came into my life as a teacher, Romanito Carrillo. I will always love you, even though we don't see each other as much, but of the famous Carrillo family, amazing planero, bongocero. I know his brother Anthony is like the top bongocero or one of the top bongoceros. And Ito's really mentored me at a point which took me to the next level as a student, playing the subidor. I didn't know at the time because it was so insular. Like I was, a new student, new to the Puerto Rican community. I was playing Primo in the classes, in the dance classes, and learning as a student under the mentorship of Romanito Carrillo and Hector Lugo. And Melanie Maldonado Diaz comes to one of our classes at Dance Mission. Maybe this was probably about 2004, 2005. And she's like, oh my God, you're playing Primo. That's a big deal. There's really no women playing Primo, except for, shout out, Manuela Arceniegas was probably one of the only women playing the subidor with her Grupo Yaya in New York at the time. I'm talking 2004, 2005. So I was learning to play Primo then. And then my first kind of like transformative moment, or one of the first transformative moments for me, was in 2006. Our teacher, Shafali, got married. And the whole bomba group, we went to Puerto Rico. We had just taken an intense workshop series with La Familia Cepeda, Modesto, Gladys, and Brenda. And so we go that summer in July 2006 to Puerto Rico, and I played subidor for the first time in Puerto Rico. And I might have been one of the first women to play Primo publicly in Puerto Rico, of this generation probably, at the time. So that was in 2006, because I remember then everywhere I went, people were like, oh, tú eres la que tocas Primo, siéntate a tocar Primo. And it was a really amazing summer trip for me. And from then I made it a point to go to Puerto Rico at least twice a year to learn on my own as much as I could.
That's fantastic for the viewers that are tan sintonizados con nosotros, those of you who are in sync with us. The primo is the drum that talks within the structure of any of the styles in the genre of bomba. It's also known as subidor. And she talked about the buleador, that she started off playing one of the supportive drums. But the primo, yes, as she said, is a big deal, because that is the drum that talks with the dancer. It has to be able to improvise, and the person that plays the primo is really recognized as the master drummer in a group of bomberos, and that's fantastic. You spoke about this group before. You mentioned it in passing, Las Bomberas de la Bahia. We have a picture of this group, and we're gonna ask Jorge and Master Control to put it up.
Yeah, that's us. We're going to shout out to the founding members that are in that picture, Saraseta Ragazzi, Melissa Reyes, and Denise La Colora Gonzalez. They were founding members of the group with me in 2006, 2007, actually. What happened was my good friend, so La Peña Cultural Center has been very influential in my life as an activist for social change and as a bombera. One, that's the classes I started learning at. But then my good friend Sara Guerra at the time in 2006 was a program director for La Peña. And she said, we have this event coming up in a few months, the following year, March of 2007, the Latin American Festival, and we're gonna feature women. You're playing the drums. I have some funding. I think at the time it was, a small kind of like fund, produce an event. And I was like freaked out. I said, oh my God, I've never done that. But I was just really inspired by, in the Bay Area, there was a movement, like women wanted to learn to play the drums. We had a women's bomba jam, and all these women came, and no disrespect to the men in the community, but the women wanted to play, and there was a thirst for it. I mean, to this day, Bay Area bomba is predominantly women. I mean, that's just, it is what it is. Let's be real. Wow. Yeah, it's more women in the bomba community than men. And I would venture to say, like, just proportionally. So I get this funding, and another very influential person in my early bomba life, Cynthia Renta, another New York native from I think she was based out of New York, and had moved to the Bay. For a while, she was there with us in the Bay Area, taking classes at La Peña, being active in the bomba community there. Her and Saraseta really helped me kind of put together this event called La Bomba es Nuestra, and it was the first all-female bomba event that brought together bomberas from California, Puerto Rico, and the diaspora. And we had a week of rehearsals and one night of performance. And that happened.
What year was this?
That was March of 2007 at La Peña Cultural Center. Participating in that event were a group of heavy hitter bomberas that we were able to bring together. I really want to thank Cynthia Renta, because she really made that happen. I didn't know people outside of my bomba community. And she was like, I know this person. So we pulled together Norca Nadal Hernandez from New York, Melanie Maldonado Diaz, Oxil Febles from Puerto Rico, now in New York, Amarilis Rios Rosa, who's now just an amazing percussionist and bomba subidora as well, who was also starting to play subidora at the time. We had our local bomberas. I'm sure I'm missing someone. We had invited Manuela. Manuela wasn't able to join us, but Manuela in one of our events gave us permission to do one of her songs. But that was the original crew, Norca, Oxil, Cynthia, of course, Cynthia, Saraseta, and I kind of pulled the event together. We had Amarilis, Rios Rosa, and we did this event, Melanie Maldonado, where we all kind of contributed something to the event, pulled together an amazing event of performance of all women on the stage together with our local group. And so we were kind of thinking about what's the next step for women in bomba in the Bay Area once the visiting bomberas leave. And instrumental to that, who gave me really a lot of confidence and courage to start our own group. I was a starting director with Saraseta being the co-director, was Oxil and Norca. So I want to give a huge shout out. Norca Bomba Works. She's one of, right there from Maya West, but has been in New York many years. And of course, Oxil Febles, Paso Negro, because they were like, you guys, sigan adelante, do your own group, like practice, like Nandi had just emerged as the first all-female group in New York. Of course, Yaya in Las Yaya, and now Legacy Women in New York, but Nandía in Puerto Rico. And so Norca gave us our song, right? Las Bomberas de la Bahía. We're like, okay. And so Norca started the song in holandés. Preparen candela, que ya llegaron las bomberas de la Bahía. And so we were like, shit, we got a song, we got to start a group. So that's how we started. It was like, what group starts with the song first? But we did. Thank you, Norca Hernandez Nadal.
That's a good one. That, I mean, if somebody ever asked me that question, if I'm ever interviewed, hey, how do you start a group? Well, start with a song first, and then you can start the group. You know.
Yeah. So we would meet at my house once a week, and we did a year of almost a year of practice until we had our first event in December of 2007. We, after the March 2007 La Bombas Nuestra, we had our first gig, quote unquote, professional gigs in November for a Day of the Dead with Las Crudas from Cuba at Galeria de la Raza. And then in December at La Peña was our big debut as a group, Las Bomberas de la Bahía. And we had a great run, amazing cast of women, also a lot of them activists in their own right, singers, percussionists, dancers.
Wow. So the group no longer exists?
No, the group no longer exists. Now, we have some members of Las Bomberas de la Bahía that are in our Taller Bombalele crew. And then Las Bomberas never had a class. Like our class was, our class base for some of us was La Peña. The Bay Area Bomba en Plena workshop, Hector and Shafali's school. And then when Julia moved in 2013, about a year later, fellow Bombera, Holly Schneider, she passed on, and so que en paz descanse, and Vanessa Camarena were running a group, studio called Studio Grand. So they invited Julia and said, we've got this amazing resource in the Bay Area, Julia Cepeda, an amazing maestra and dancer, and her, who's lived this tradition. She should teach a class. And so Julia started a dance class in 2014 that I supported as a drummer, and then I started my my percussion class after the summer of 2016 when the second huge mentor in my life, Jesus Cepeda, really kind of helped me ground that class. He came for a summer to teach classes and kind of mentor me in starting my own percussion class. And I want to shout out un abrazo, saludo y mucho cariño para mi maestro Jesus Cepeda Brenes. He is the master, el Tambor Mayor, and he came into my life in 2013, and I'm blessed for every minute I get to learn from that man.
Fantastic. One of the great things about you that I've noticed just from the little time we've spent is that you've mentioned so many names of people that have mentored you, taught you, helped you, etc., in all sorts of ways, both personally and musically. It's really great to hear that. Because occasionally when I've done interviews with people, they don't really mention their teachers or et cetera, especially in the jazz world. And everybody, when I meet a great musician, my curiosity always leads me to say, well, this person is great. I wonder who they learned from. Who were the people that taught them? So in my case, it was my father, my high school band director, Mr. William Ryan, and somebody I studied when I was a student at the Berkeley College of Music, Keith Copeland. They changed my life. And I always mention them when I can. But you've mentioned Chachos, el número de personas. I mean, it's like amazing. People hopefully will view this again, because after we finish, we always archive it and it's always looped. So you can write all these names down and get the whole history of the bomba tradition in the Bay Area. So thank you for mentioning all of these elders and also contemporaries of yours. I'm very curious, and obviously if you don't want to answer the question, I understand. Why did the group disband? There's always things why groups disband. I'm always curious. Something that's so good, why did it end? If you don't want to answer it, I understand. But if you do, I think we get some insight into the dynamics of running a group and the difficulties of it.
Thank you, Bobby. Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I will say this. So I want to say two things because I want to talk about what you just mentioned, and then we'll get into the Bomberas de la Bahia, at least my perspective, right? So I feel like I am always humbled and honored to be able to be seen as a woman, as a queer woman, to be able to have a space in the bomba tradition. And for me, I think it's a spiritual tradition of resistance for Afro-Puerto Rican people. So as a non-Puerto Rican and as a non-Afro-Puerto Rican person, I always want to remember my place and honor my elders and ancestors in this tradition and my contemporaries who I learned from. So for me, it's always important, and it almost seems like a laundry list because so many people have been part of my journey that I'm so grateful for. So I want to say that first. And second, you know, Las Bomberas de la Bahia started with a lot of love and just this need to learn to do bomba. I think that we as women, all the women in the group, dedicated a lot of time and energy to being that. And so I didn't know what it meant to direct a group and to lidiar con tantas mujeres and all of us in different points of our life. You then have relationships that emerge within the group context and cliques that form. So I think that there was a lot of beautiful magic that happened. Bomberas got to play at Bombelenazo 2 years in 2010 and 2012. I want to thank the Bombelenazo committee because those were big, amazing moments in our lives as a group. We got to tour LA, the Bay Area, the California, go to LA, San Diego and play. We played for awesome, we opened for groups like, you know, La Santa Cecilia, Jarabe de Palo. Like we got to do Sonora Dinamita. We got to do a lot of amazing things on stage, and we were a performance group and we were a family. And I think there was a point in my life when I fell in love and a lot of people, a lot of the women in the group maybe had other things happening in their lives. And I made a lot of mistakes as a co-director. So I think a lot of things just kind of came into way. Hubo un poco de explosión ahí. And so I think that there's a lot of things I wish I would have done different. I want to shout out all of those women that were part of my journey in Las Bomberas de la Bahia, and Saraceta Ragazzi as a co-director. Cynthia, en el momento que estaba con nosotros, she moved back to New York. And the teachers that supported us, there were many teachers that supported us, and other bomberas that collaborated with us through the years, Marian Torres, Ibelis Bombera de Corazon Diaz, Jade Power Sotomayor, Melanie Maldonado Diaz, Norca Auxil, the list, Amarilis Rios Rosa, like all of these women came and supported us, were part of performances with us, but our time came. And I do still dream of a reunion sometime, pero vamos a ver, everybody's kind of in their own lives and worlds. And like I said, yo cometí algunos errores como directora del grupo that like I think hurt people's feelings. And so that doesn't make for sometimes having a nice farewell. So I'll say that, Bobby, just because I don't want to get into bochinche land, but I do want to say, like, you know, I had a hand in some of the dysfunction and a lot of the dysfunction. And so, you know, uno ojalá aprendemos as we go and as we make mistakes.
Well, I really appreciate your, for any band leader, it's a difficult question because these types of things happen with any band leader. So I really, really appreciate your candor and being forthright. And I'm sure the people that are from your crew who are watching now, maybe some of them are going like this, whoa, and you'll get a phone call, and maybe then we could have you return to New York City as maybe do a reunion concert, because tell us, this group obviously was documented. There must be video footage, etc. Can people go on YouTube and see the group on YouTube?
You can. So we were pre-YouTube era, perdóname. There's a few clips. If you look at Bomberas de la Bahia, you'll see one of us at a festival called Mujeres de Maíz. You may see some Bombelenazo footage that was like taken unauthorized. You might see some performances. We did a few key performances, but you know, that was before the boom of that was before Facebook Lives, before Instagram. And sometimes I feel a way just because we are sometimes omitted from history. So before that happens, I want to make sure, at least on this video, that we get Yaya was the first all-women group that did Puerto Rican bomba and Afro-Dominican palo. You guys, we're on, we stood on your shoulders, Manuela and your crew. They're now called Legacy Women. Grupo Nandi, Auxil Febles, first all-women group in Puerto Rico. Then came Las Bomberas de la Bahia, and then shortly after us, Las Bombleneras. So I want to give a huge shout out to Plena Combativa and say, Ibelis Bombera de Corazon Diaz and Jessica, they also, in the diaspora in Chicago, were doing bomba and plena. I think they're the only group that does a mix of both bomba and plena. Yaya does bomba and palo. Bomberas, we just did bomba. And then we've got so many groups now, right? Then came Ausuba, Las Chamacas del Buleo, Las Cimarronas, and now there's a lot of women running groups. So even if they're not all women groups, you've got women who are starting their own bomba schools, and that's a beautiful thing. And last, I'm gonna say my bomba elders who maybe didn't play subidor, but they were holding it down. Petra Cepeda, who held down La Familia Cepeda's group for many years. Tata Cepeda, Cristi Mangual, right? Those are the women that I look up to doing bomba. When I see Norca's mom and aunt, Norca Nadal, when I see her mom and aunt dance bomba, those are the elders that we look up to and say, man, these women were holding it down. From day one, women have always been important in bomba. Sometimes their stories aren't told. So, and Doña Caridad Brenes de Cepeda, right? You see that woman dance in those clips, the few clips in YouTube, and for me, I get goosebumps.
Wow, wow, this is amazing. If if I were to start taking notes, I'd have like a notebook filled of names, and I'm going to have one after I review this. After we finish the interview, I'm going to write all these things down because these are groups that need to be heard, need to be talked about, especially, and if they have recordings, they need to be played. So thank you for mentioning all of these groups.
Yeah.
Now, in your coming up as a young bombera, right? Did you ever get any, and I have to ask this question because it's only natural to ask, did you ever get any pushback from the men, at any time at all?
I think what I got was some subliminal pushback, but I got a lot of love too. So I gotta say, okay, I'm a feminist and I'm queer, and I'm for trans lives, I'm for queer lives, I'm for visibility, and I'm for being in a space that should be an Afro-Puerto Rican woman-led space. I'm for that, all day, every day. And also, I gotta say that I've had teachers in my life who, despite a lot of the machismo in our communities, taught me. So Ito Carrillo, I love you because you taught me. You may have had feelings about Bomberas de la Bahia and how that happened, but you taught me. Jesus Cepeda, never have felt any kind of pushback. I think people, when they see you have an open heart to learn, that does a lot. But yes, there were these moments where I felt like, if I was sit to play subidor in my early days, they would go with a seis corrido a las mías. Let's see if she can play. A lot of men would come and dance. They're like, oh shit, I've never seen so many men come into the batey, pero venían a bailar. And so, or those moments where if I would sit on the barril and it's like, oh, ahora es el tiempo de las chicas, and they would pull whatever women where they needed how to play or not, or where they to play. And that would frustrate the hell out of me because I wanted to be seen as an amazing subidor player, period. In my full self, who I am. I'm a queer woman, a queer butch woman, but very much a woman for queer visibility. But I want to be a good subidor player. I don't want to be la mejor tocadora o una de las buenas tocadoras en grupos de mujeres. I want to be seen as she can hold her own in any space. So I think that, for me, some of the pushback came on maybe doubting that skill or tú sabes tocar. Segura, but also came a lot of love, and I hope that we should talk a little bit about right now what it means. There's like women that have taken the drum. I think that's important, but I think what's more important in addition to that is how we use our voices, because there is something wrong in a society where women and trans women are being killed at alarming rates. and there's nothing being done about it. Especially, we're looking at Puerto Rico right now. It is a state of emergency. And who's out there are women playing the panderos, playing the drums, leading the charge. Colectivo Feminista en Construcción, que Dios me las bendiga por todo el trabajo que hacen. Revista Étnica, and all of the women that are holding it down, that were the reason why the Roseo movement did what it did in the summer, and that all of us in the diaspora were able to be a part of.
That was an incredible moment in history, in Puerto Rican history, because all over the world, it demonstrated how people can come together and fight oppression in a big way and disrespect on all levels. The removal of Ricky Rosselló as the governor of Puerto Rico. Just to give the audience members a perspective, in case you don't know some of the things that Denise was talking about, she would sit in a group, and instead of playing a rhythm that's played at a medium tempo or a slow tempo like bomba Sica, they would all of a sudden call a seis corrido, which is a really intense, fast rhythm. In other words, to challenge her, oh, you want to play subidor? Okay, sit down. But I must say, it's cool because in the world of jazz, we get the same thing. Somebody, hey, can I sit in? You sit in, and then all of a sudden they call a tune like Giant Steps, which changes key every bar, or it's a harmonic challenge, or it's a harmonic gauntlet, or playing a tune really super at a fast tempo, bebop tune, etc. So it's just part of the dues, Talking about the things that you just mentioned, socio-politically, bomba and plena have always been musics, like all our musics really, in our folkloric traditions, musics of resistance. Talk about your activist work in the community, which is another part of your life that most of us viewing, who are especially from New York and possibly from Puerto Rico, two hotbeds of bomba and plena, maybe don't know about. Talk about that and how you incorporate the music, which naturally is a form of cultural expression, obviously, and a form of resistance. But talk how you amplify that in your own work as an activist. Tell us about that side of your life.
Absolutely. So I moved to California. I did a small stint doing the cultural work. Like I said, in San Antonio, I worked as an arts administrator for Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center. And then I worked for a little bit with Teatro Campesino, which informed a lot of my, they do a lot of theater for farm workers. That was the history of Teatro Campesino here in San Juan Bautista. So I worked there for a little bit. And then I worked for a couple months with La Peña Cultural Center. But then I started working in 2003 in California for the United Farm Workers as an organizer. And then in 2000, for a year, in 2002. And then in 2003, I worked for, after a year with the farm workers, I worked for SEIU, and, it's a huge, union, international union. But in particular, I started working at one of the locals that represents workers in low wage service industries. So basically, from then on, my work has been organizing workers who are predominantly immigrant workers, who are working in industries that are low-wage industries by design, what I call almost like modern-day slavery, and where workers raise their voices collectively to change this country. So, for me, I think it's taught me a lot about how to like be a part of movement. What are the ways in which we can find common ground to organize, even if we come from diverse backgrounds. And for me, just because of my own history and my family, I'm really devoted to the immigration movement. And I think that the way that this government has treated undocumented workers is violent, it's horrible, and it's just something we need to change. There's currently right now kids in cages in this freaking country, and people migrate to this country as immigrants because of the situations that our own capitalist colonial economy has created in their countries. My family, my grandmother would have loved to have stayed in Mexico. If she didn't have to for survival of her family, moved to the United States. So
Right.
that work what Bomba has done for me is it's given me a spiritual grounding. And I always mention my elders because in particular, Jesus Cepeda has been a huge force in my life because of how he lives his values of bomba. Because for him, it's a way of life, but beyond that, it's also rooted in resistance. And so I think that bomba has allowed me to also use my skills from work and the people that we are able to influence because of classes, because of performance, to merge those two together. For me, I said it in another interview. I feel like it's a duty, it's an honor and a duty. If I'm gonna play bomba and I'm gonna feed my soul through bomba, I better, excuse my language, I better fucking fight for the freedom of Puerto Rican people and the liberation of Puerto Rican people and all that implies and entails through, by and for the people living in Puerto Rico, right? So I think for me, how can I be of service? Because what bomba has done for me has changed my life. And so I always wanna offer however I can, be a body, be an ally, be an accomplice to all of those cultural workers that are also activists and that know the urgency of the moment, because the state of colonia in Puerto Rico is criminal. It is fucking criminal.
Well said, well said. And thank you for saying that publicly. I mean, it's very important. And it's amazing how the music itself has inspired your activist work, your work as an activist. I'd just like to remind everybody that's viewing, if you have any questions for Denise, our great guest tonight, please go to the chat function and type your question in and we'll give it, we'll definitely ask her, which we're going to do right now. We have Angel Diaz, who's asking a question that whenever we talk about Bomba and Plena, this question is always asked, but it begs to be asked, and it's good that we have you here to get your opinion on it. Angel Diaz asks, what would it take to bring this beautiful genre of music to the airwaves?
Oh, that's a good question. So it makes me think about a couple of things. One is there's a lot of amazing bomba people producing their own music that are labors of love and that are on, you can find them on iTunes, Spotify, Bandcamp. So here we go with the list, Bobby, but we gotta shout these people out because they self-produce their music. Pili Vialis just put out Soy de Mayagüez. Booyah Live and Southern Sessions, look them up, find their CDs. You've got right there an amazing resource in Alma Moyo, No Hay Sábado Sin Sol. There's Semilla de Identidad by the group Desde Cero. La Familia Cepeda has a lot of recordings as well, Jesus Cepeda in particular. Bomba Mandingo Jazz, which for all you jazz fans, you've got to go. There's some amazing arrangements there. In Spirit, 20 years after his death, Don Rafael Cepeda Tiles, that's Bomba Cruda. There's Cuando la Bomba Te Llama, Bomba Rhythms, so that you can practice and really internalize those rhythms that George Vasquez has out as well. You can find that on iTunes. Like, there is Bomba out there, folks. Zona de Bomba has a CD as well. El Cuarteto de Bomba is about to release a CD, so be on the lookout. They released a single called Paloma del Monte. Hear that out. Lero Martinez has a couple of CDs. Jerry Ferrao has a CD as well. Jerry Ferrao has Tiempo al Tiempo. You can find all of these on the airwaves. And I would say one thing I love about Bomba is I'm a believer thanks to my teachers, right? And I want to bring into the space another teacher of mine and mentor and elder, Dr. Eileen Tejada, who's doing amazing work on Bomba and its roots as an Afro-Taino, Afro-Indigenous alliance against capitalism and colonialism. Why there are these values in Bomba that I've learned from my elders that are important to keep and safeguard. Bomba is collective. You cannot do Bomba by yourself. It really speaks to bringing community together. Shout out to all those artesanos that make the drums. The drums are not mass produced. They're made by hand, one by amazing bomba barril makers. Too many to name, but I'm going to name a couple of the elder bomba barril artesanos, or the ones that have been doing it a long time. Jesus Cepeda Brenes, Ivan Davila, Papo del Valle. Then we've got Jorge Martinez. You've got Bomba Works in New York, and so many others. The late Ricky Soler, Victor Vélez. There's all these amazing artisans. They make the maracas, Taller Kenuati, Taller Yavizi, and then the skirt makers. So everything about bomba is like locally produced, locally made, artisan made, one by one, with a lot of love and ashe that they put into those instruments. So I think that it's important we keep these values of bomba, and let's do away with the competition in bomba. So I love shouting people out, because when one rises, we all rise. So learn from people that, as many people as you can, support bomba groups everywhere. There's no cual grupo mejor que el otro. Everyone has its own unique voice. So there's so many beautiful people doing bomba. And let's do it responsibly. Let's do it well. And let's do it in service of the liberation of Puerto Rico.
Fantastic. You just gave a masterclass there in terms of what's happening in the bomba scene, both audio-wise, visual-wise, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd like to remind everybody, in keeping this in mind with these recordings, that I myself, I'm not aware of all the recordings that are happening out there. So I'm so glad, Denise, you mentioned these things. Those of you who are out there in the bomba and plena community, some of you know, some of you don't, that I have a internationally broadcast radio show on Fridays on WBGO-FM, which is the #1 jazz station in the country, the Latin Jazz Cruise, from 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I play the whole multiverse of the Latin Jazz Continuum. So I just don't play Afro-Cuban and Brazilian oriented jazz. On my show this Friday, you're going to hear a lot of plena jazz, and some bomba jazz. So please, if anyone is of the people you mentioned that's listening out there wants to get any recordings to me, you can always contact me through my I have 2 Facebook pages, but contact me on my personal Facebook page, not the fan page, and go to the message section and just send me a PM, a private message, and get the recordings to me. We'll talk. And also you can email me at N as in Nancy, UJACKRICAN, again, NUJACKRICAN, newjackrican@yahoo.com. How's that? So if you have anything, Denise, which is our next question from Jorge, which is our next question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Jorge, who are you recording with? And do you have any new recordings coming up?
Okay, yeah, great question. Before I do that, I want to announce a couple more. Mixta Criolla, one of our own. Romanito Carrillo also has a plena CD that just came out. And then we've got, of course, Los Plenos de la 21. I don't even have to, it's like Grammy Award-winning Bomba y Plena, and Bomba y Ya. So I know there's one coming up. There's another one called Trascendencias, Sobeto, Bomba y Ya del Sur. Want to shout them out too. So I've recorded with Jesus Cepeda, Gracias Maestro, in 20 years in spirit. It's a remastering of Rafael Cepeda Atiles' songs. He's singing with some of his grandchildren in that CD, and I got to play subidor on a couple of those songs. I got to play subidor on Kili Vialis's CD, Soy de Mayagüez, so gracias Kili, un abrazo, mucho amor. And I've got 2 CDs in the making. So Taller Bombalele has one that we recorded in 2016. That is a project that Jesus mentored me and Julia on, called La Bomba es Vida. So that's right now in its final process, and we're in the middle of recording a second CD called Mi Borique Fuerte with Taller Bombalele. So I'm of course playing, sharing the subidor with Jesus in both of those CDs. I've recorded also with Maria Jose Montijo. She's got a video coming out called Huracan. It's a must-see. Maria Jose Montijo Majo, Esotérica Tropical. You can look her up on Instagram. And she is an amazing composer from Puerto Rico, from Caimito, plays the harp. And so that's not a bomba CD, but there's a couple of bomba influenced songs in there that I recorded on. I also recorded with Pedrito Pastrana. He's an amazing cuatro player, and he's got a project coming up that I was able to do. Me and Jesus did some barriles on that as well. So keep an eye out for that. Pedro has played with John Santos and a bunch of other amazing artists from Rio Grande, Puerto Rico, now in the Bay Area.
Fantastic. And now that you said all of that, you got to get all that stuff to me. So as Joan Rivers would say, we'll talk, you know. So we'll talk afterwards, either through personally by phone or through email, but you have to get these CDs to me because my purpose with the radio show is to not only inspire the listeners, but also educate them, because the more people know, people do not understand. We've grown in this United States, we've become culturally illiterate and insensitive. We look at music as just a trivial entertainment many times, and people don't understand that the music that we create in our ancestral homelands, this represents our culture. So through the radio show, I get to do that, and through my performances as well as an artist, as many of you know. So Denise, we have to talk definitely, because
yes,
you probably mentioned in the short amount of time, in 5 minutes, you mentioned probably about almost 25 CDs, I think. So that's a lot of music.
A lot of music
that needs to be heard, because if you don't hear it, it's like that old joke, you know, if you make a sound in the woods and nobody's around, have you made a noise? You know, so, and this music needs to be heard, especially at this time period. And I'd like to remind everybody that obviously registration has ended for voting, but we need to vote. It's coming up November 3rd. And people on the island of Puerto Rico in the bomba and plena traditions are getting the word out, and I'm sure you're getting the word out as well in the community that you come in contact with, not just the bomba and plena community, but all communities. So Denise, we wanted to thank you so much immensely for all of your work as not only a musician, but work spreading the culture through education, and also being such a proud leader in the women's rights movement, the LGBTQ community, et cetera, especially now that the Supreme Court nominee is supposedly, well, they want to take away those rights of marriage to those communities. And these are things that we need to be woke, be conscious of, because if you're not conscious, you know, I mean, if you're not invited to dinner, you become part of the menu, you know.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for everything you've done. You honor us with your presence. And I'm going to turn it back to my co-artistic director at the Bronx Music Heritage Center. Oh, and don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, you can watch this again after it's over with, and as well as all of the other percussion discussions we've done. I believe this is the 15th or 16th one we've done. And you can also watch the Bronx Music Hall Blast short videos that we've done of the forthcoming Bronx Music Hall, a 250-seat theater that we're building in the South Bronx across the street from, what's the name of the college? Oh, Boricua College. That's coming next year. It'll be open. It'll be a multi-use theater. And we have also an amphitheater outside where we will be doing Sábados de Rumba, Cuban Rumba, and Sundays of bomba and plena, bombazos plenazos as well. So that's something to look forward to for next year. Thank you again, Denise. We're going to turn it to my co-artistic director, the one and only, la única, Elena Subcomandante Martinez.
Hi, everyone. I want to thank Denise. Thank you so much. You were incredible. The interview was incredible. We are so glad to have you part of our percussion discussion. Thank you. And I also want to say thank you to Julia Gutierrez Rivera, because she made the connection to you with us. So I want to give her a shout out. And everyone, thank you so much. Tomorrow we have another show, another installment of a new series, Voices for Justice. We kind of have this platform where in today's world with all the craziness that's going on, we want to find a way for artists and activists to come together, and hopefully maybe artists can find out how to use their voice. What platforms can they use their voice to say something about all the different things that are going on right now. This event is hosted by Rebel Diaz, and tomorrow the theme is Indigenous and Black Solidarities, and it'll be featuring Black Lives Matters and Indigenous artists and activists. So we hope you can join us tomorrow on our Facebook page again at 8 o'clock. And everyone, thank you so much. Have a good night.
Also, thank you to Jorge Vasquez in Command Central backstage. Thank you so much, Jorge. We'll see you on the radio on WBGO.org Friday Eastern Standard Time, 9 to 11.